From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight is about the demand for ending the vaccine patent. Protesters took to the streets of New York City yesterday to demand the end of Pfizer's COVID vaccine patent. The demonstration coincides with German Chancellor Angela Merkel's visit to the United States. The Pfizer vaccine was developed in Germany. Here is Dr. Steve Auerbach, a protester and retired epidemiologist.
These vaccines were developed with public money. There is no reason for more billions of dollars to be made by the pharmaceutical industry while millions of people die.
Here's Manzoor Chima, organizer of the protest.
We want the pharmaceutical companies and German Chancellor to hear the demands and chants from people all over the world. I'm from Pakistan. 1.7% people in Pakistan have been vaccinated. In India, it's about 2%. In Africa, about 1%. This is criminal greed of the rich countries and the pharmaceutical companies, and we are here to protest against that.
President Joe Biden and German Chancellor Merkel met in Washington on Thursday. United States Senators Marco Rubio and Jeff Merkley applauded the Senate passage of their bipartisan Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act yesterday. The bill ensured that products made using the forced labors of Uyghur and others in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, as known in China, or occupied East Turkestan, do not enter the U.S. market. It also bars items made by some entities affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party. Rubio previously authored the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act of 2020. It was the first piece of legislation on Uyghur human rights to be signed into law in the world. The forced labor bill will now go to the House for consideration. The bipartisan bill was co-sponsored by 54 senators, which included 27 Republicans, 25 Democrats, and 2 independents. Sirwi Hossain, leader of the NGO Justice for All's Save Uyghur campaign, welcomed the passage of the bill, which Uyghurs and allies have been campaigning for. Millions of eligible American parents are getting up to $300 deposited into their bank accounts today. Qualifying families will automatically receive monthly checks if the IRS has their banking information from tax refunds or stimulus checks. If not, the check will be mailed. Half of the total amount will be sent in monthly payments through December. The remainder will be sent with next year's tax refund. The payments are a part of the $1.9 trillion stimulus package put together earlier this year by President Joe Biden. If Americans are unsure whether they will receive the funds, the IRS is advising them to check their bank accounts or to use its eligibility assistant tool. The tool is also available in Spanish. The United States has invited United Nations human rights envoys for a visit to the country. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. will issue standing invitations to all UN envoys, known as special rapporteurs. Special rapporteurs compile information on race, discrimination, and human rights. They will report back to the United Nations. Blinken said that the administration had already offered an official visit to the UN Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism and minority issues. American Muslim human rights organization Justice for All welcomed the Biden administration's decision to accept the UN scrutiny of racism in the U.S. Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid is the founder of Justice for All. He has asked China and India to follow the U.S. example in allowing the UN and other human rights organizations full access to their countries as well. China has declined to provide access to the largest concentration camp since World War II, where at least 1 million Uyghur Muslims are forcefully detained. India has also repeatedly refused UN human rights bodies full access to Indian-held Kashmir and recently forced out Amnesty International from India. An American Muslim company is working with a luxury department store chain, Nordstrom, to introduce a new line of hijabs. Hena and Hijabs launched an exclusive collection of luxury hijabs at Nordstrom. It's one of the first hijab collections offered by a major US fashion retailer. The Minnesota-based Hena and Hijab designs hijabs for Muslim women, but these can be worn by anyone. Designer Hilal Ibrahim found Hena and Hijabs. It was established to address the difficulty Muslim women face in finding sustainable and fashionable hijabs in retail and healthcare settings. Former United States President George W. Bush has generally avoided weighing in on his successor's policies, including those of former President Donald Trump. But while speaking to Deutsche Welle in Germany, he broke his silence on America's military withdrawal from Afghanistan, calling it a mistake. Bush, as president, led the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. Ending the longest-lasting American war is currently a popular bipartisan move. About 650 American service members are expected to remain in Afghanistan, guarding Washington's sprawling diplomatic compound. Meanwhile, the Taliban have captured yet another border crossing. Their white flag now flies at one of Afghanistan and Pakistan's main border crossings. The Taliban already controls areas bordering China, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Uzbekistan, and now Pakistan. In another sign of Taliban dominance, Western governments are rapidly reassessing the situation. The British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace recently said the UK was ready to work with the Taliban. This was on the condition that the Taliban enter into a power-sharing government. Beijing says 9 Chinese workers were among the 12 people killed Wednesday by a bomb attack on a bus in northwestern Pakistan. China called for severe punishment for the culprits. But Islamabad blames the explosion on a gas leak. The bus was carrying 40 Chinese engineers, surveyors, and mechanical staff to a hydropower dam construction site in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Islamabad is Beijing's closest regional ally. A large number of Chinese are based in the country to supervise and build infrastructure projects. Pakistan's foreign ministry, in a statement, said that the bus plunged into a ravine after a mechanical failure, resulting in leakage of gas that caused a blast. In April, the Pakistani Taliban claimed responsibility for a deadly suicide blast at a luxury hotel in the southwest province of Balochistan. The hotel was hosting the Chinese ambassador, who was not hurt. The United Nations Human Rights Council has called for those behind massive enforced disappearances in Syria over the past decade to be held accountable. The resolution on Tuesday was presented by Britain and a number of European countries, along with the United States, Turkey, and Qatar. It decried that Syria's crisis has entered a second decade marked by consistent patterns of gross violations. The war in Syria has killed nearly 500,000 people since it started in 2011, with all sides in the increasingly complex conflict accused of war crimes. The conflict began when peaceful demonstrators during the Arab Spring started marching. This resulted in the Syrian regime attacking them. The resolution was adopted with 26 of the Council's 47 members in favor, 6 opposing, and 15 who abstained. Thousands risk their lives every year trying to reach Europe. For hundreds, it means a secret voyage over oceans, often in the darkness of the night. Watch more here by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
So far this year, more than 880 people have died trying to reach Europe from North Africa. 572 migrants were lucky. They were rescued by the SOS Méditerranée Ocean Viking ship. This is the largest rescue in years. The operation was Ocean Viking's 6th rescue within days. Most immigrants are forced to travel by human traffickers using unseaworthy boats. This includes a wooden overcrowded boat that carries 71 migrants. Since the start of the summer, the number of crossings has increased. This season, The Mediterranean provides relatively better weather and calmer seas. However, the number of those lost at sea has also risen. Sometimes these immigrants face much more than just the sea. They face fire. In this video, the Libyan Coast Guard vessel is firing at migrants and possibly trying to ram their boat. Fortunately, the migrants landed on the Italian island of Lampedusa.
Look at close it will be. Oh my god.
They flee because of oppression or poverty back home. Some leave because of brighter horizons. Some flee alone to send back money to their loved ones. Others leave with their whole family. There were 183 children who were rescued this year. We don't know how many were children amongst the 880 people who are known to be drowned. We don't know their names either. We know the name of this child, however. He was washed back to a Turkish beach. His family was fleeing the Syrian civil war, where 500,000 people have been killed.
Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. The Texas voting bills that prompted state Democrats' flight to Washington, D.C. this week included changes in the state's voting laws. What's new in these laws introduced in the Texas House and Senate? To discuss this in detail, let's go to Saliha Farouk. Over to you, Saliha.
Thank you so much once again. Today, we're quite happy to be joined by Joshua Blank, who is Research Director of the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas in Austin. Joshua, I thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Now, what do people need to know about these new voting restrictions being introduced to the extent that Democratic politicians felt the need to leave the state of Texas?
Well, I mean, I think the thing to know that a lot of the restrictions we're talking about here in Texas are in response to a number of the provisions made in Harris County here in Texas. And that's the home of Houston, which is one of Texas's and one of the country's largest cities, to make it easier to vote during the coronavirus pandemic. So a large bulk of the laws being discussed here in Texas are ones that would basically take some of the allowances that Harris County made to make it easier to vote, like 24-hour voting, drive-through voting, expansion of mail-in voting, and to make those to basically make that not an option going forward. Some of the more controversial provisions include giving what we call partisan poll watchers, or people assigned by the parties to go and monitor polling places, more access to voting locations. And the other sort of provision that's really causing a lot of heartburn for Democrats are provisions that would make it more difficult to vote by mail and or for voters with disabilities to vote. And so, in and of itself, these are the provisions that are in the bill. But also, it's hard just to talk about this in terms of Texas, because what the Texas Democrats are reacting to here, as much as what's going on in Texas, is part of a national discussion where Republican legislatures across the country are attempting to create new restrictions around voting in response to the 2020 election, while Democratic voters and Democratic legislators see voter suppression as the real problem.
Now, if you could also talk to us about the parallel thinking between Republicans perhaps arguing that it is essential for election security, while Democrats are arguing in this regard that this would be a supposed attack on the right to vote, given these newfound voting restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats and Republicans could not come at this issue from two more different vantage points. In lots of polling that we've done at the University of Texas with the Texas Tribune of registered voters here in Texas, we've repeatedly found that among Texas Republicans, there's a widespread belief that fraud is a pervasive problem in the election system. And so we ask, how often do you think that ineligible voters are able to cast votes? Republicans will, the majority of Republicans will say this happens often or frequently, whereas most Democratic voters will say this never or rarely happens. On the flip side, when we ask how often eligible voters are prevented from voting, the vast majority of Texas Democrats say this happens often or frequently, and the vast majority of Texas Republicans say this almost never or rarely happens. And the sum total of this, I think, in the current discussion is when we ask Texas voters whether or not Texas's election system discriminates against racial and ethnic minorities, nearly 4 in 5 Republicans say it doesn't, and nearly the same share of Democrats say it does. And that really points to how intractable this issue is because even though both sides see problems with the voting system, the problems they see are very far apart from each other and require completely different solutions.
For a lot of people, this seems like such an unprecedented way to get the point across concerning how voting should take place. What implications does this move have on lawmaking in the House of Representatives?
Well, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to answer. I think part of this is a reflection of how lawmaking has gone. In Texas, we only have a legislative session for 140 days every 2 years, and it's always a difficult process to fit that much legislation for such a large and diverse state into such a short period of time. This particular regular session was filled with really a number of priorities for Republican elected officials looking ahead to their primary elections and the next cycle. And really, the end of the session, was marked by the animosity between the two parties when the Democrats first broke quorum to stop this election bill the first time. So ultimately, going forward, I think that the comity between the two parties is gone, and so this is really the tool that Democrats had left at their disposal. But it's really a reflection of the fact that they had no other tools left at their disposal to stop these bills, or even to try to make them at least a little bit less unpalatable to them.
Now, from a federal perspective, a lot of people are concerned that the Biden administration aren't really taking seriously the threat to state-level voting laws and those threats that perhaps pose to Democratic candidates in the upcoming elections. In your opinion, do you foresee any action in Congress to present any new national rules around voting?
I think it's a really slim possibility. Ultimately, it would require a change to the Senate filibuster rules that it does not appear that key senators are willing to support. While the Texas situation certainly raises the profile of this issue even further, it has already been a high-profile issue since before the 2020 election. It has not gotten less important or less salient to people since the 2020 election. So I'm not sure that Texas Democrats heading to the federal government really changes the calculus of, a Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia who said he is not for removing the filibuster. This doesn't mean that something couldn't happen in the coming weeks or months that changes the way he thinks about this. But ultimately, I think, the chances that the federal government are coming to save Texas Democrats is pretty slim.
You mentioned the filibuster. So what comes to mind really briefly here is that voting rights bill in the US Senate are stalled by the threat of the filibuster, of course. But isn't this a similar technique being used by Democrats in Texas to block the legislation? I just wanted to get your professional take on that.
Yeah, I mean they're both examples of the Democrats in Texas on the one hand and Republicans at the federal in the Congress at the federal level on the other hand, using the legislative rules that were laid out and agreed to by members of both parties before their sessions began. Ultimately, the Democrats felt that they were being denied a lot of the sort of the abilities to question the bill and make amendments to it and challenge its constitutionality within the process. And so they chose to break the quorum, which again, the quorum is established under the rules of the Texas House. Same thing with the Senate. The filibuster is not in the Constitution, and it is simply a rule that the Senate adopts at the beginning of its legislative session for how it's going to operate. And that is a rule that can be used by members of both parties as they see fit.
You mentioned the quorum, and I just wanted to understand, is Texas unique in having this 2/3 quorum?
Almost every legislative body in the country, and even a lot of municipal bodies, have quorum limits. Basically, you need to have a certain minimum number of people show up to a legislative body to do business. And this is to make sure that a minority of members, or even just a few members of a legislative body, committee, or otherwise, don't show up at an odd time and just start making decisions for the whole body. So usually you require at least a majority of any legislative body to be present before that legislative body can do business. And that's true in Texas. That's true pretty much everywhere as far as I'm concerned.
And as we conclude today, we also wanted to understand, are Democrats correct in taking this fight to Washington, D.C.? And is the solution here only in federal legislation overriding proposed changes to Texas voting laws?
I don't think the only solution is at the federal level. Ultimately, Texas is going to continue to change, and the party system is becoming more competitive, which is why I think there's so much consternation and angst around this issue. These laws are never permanent, and they can be changed and amended going forward. So this doesn't mean that the only solution Texas Democrats have is to go to Washington to look for solutions. I think the thing that they really benefit from at this point is to keep attention on the issue. And just as much as Republicans are focusing on this in a bid to reinforce their reelection campaigns come 2022, Democrats in Texas are doing the exact same thing, and they're fighting for their constituents the only way that they feel that they can be effective at this point.
We're speaking today here with Joshua Blank, who is Research Director of the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas in Austin. Joshua, thank you so much for your time today in light of the voting crisis in Texas.
Thanks for having me.
Back to the news studio.
Thank you, Saleha. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. In one of our previous shows, we talked about the shortage of Muslim chaplains in the United States federal prisons. Only 13 chaplains are available to minister over 11,000 Muslim inmates. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. There are more than 11,000 Muslims in federal prison system. But there are only 13 chaplains or Islamic scholars to minister to them. There are different forms of discrimination takes place, but these people are incarcerated. They need spiritual help along with many other things. Why there are so few? And who is issuing these numbers, and what can be done to change it? We have someone who is engaged with this process. He is a program manager and a teacher at Taiba Foundation in California, Abdul Muhaymin As-Salim. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. How are you this afternoon?
Alhamdulillah. Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Why there are so few Muslim chaplains?
Well, one of the larger challenges I learned in being engaged with the BOP prison system and how they go about hiring chaplains is that they often, or they're not often, they do have a stricture of having chaplains who are master's degree level training. Whether or not they actually are qualified in terms of having studied the Islamic sciences in a traditional manner or through a university system and are able to relate and teach the Islamic sciences on that level, having the master's degree is a big challenge. And one of the things that we've noticed over the years is that a lot of the people who are qualified to actually be chaplains to go in and service to brothers and sisters in prison, they don't have master's degrees. So that adds an element of hindrance to being able to be hired for these positions.
That's very surprising because according to most surveys, Muslims have the second best educational background in the nation, better than average population. So why is so difficult to find people? Is this the case that there are Muslims who don't want to serve as chaplains?
I wouldn't say that they don't want to serve as chaplains, but the problem being is like most people who go off and study in traditional manner, once they've done all of the studies that they've done and reached the levels that they reach and come back, most of them have gone through what can be considered a master's level program, but they haven't gone through a university system to have attained that a lot of times. So having the actual accredited university saying that, yes, you have a master's level training in such and such a field, chaplaincy or Islamic studies, the individuals, they usually don't have that. Most of them have traditional ijazas. Some of them have bachelor's degrees, but just having the master's degree in terms of Islamic studies or chaplaincy has been a problem. Over the years, there have been a number of people who have been trying to remedy that. Quite a few people that I'm aware of that have gone to gain their master's in chaplaincy and other different types of religious learning within that realm right there, whether it's chaplaincy, divinity, Islamic studies, things of that nature. There, it's still a lack of people having or wanting to pursue that particular route of master's level study.
So there are people who are learned, but they are learned in a different system, and there is no accreditation program that, okay, this particular degree in Islamic, training equals to master's degree. So equivalency establishment is an issue then. Is that correct?
Yes, that's one of the issues. Absolutely.
Okay. So what do you think? Is that the only reason, or there is some form of discrimination against Muslim because Islamophobia is out there and Muslim left and right are discriminated? Is there some discrimination in this, or it is essentially a technical issue of a process of accreditation?
You could say that there may be some discrimination. I won't just give a blanket statement and say that, yes, it's pure discrimination going on. Oftentimes, a lot of the chaplains that we do communicate with, they would love to have Muslims come in and provide services to their inmate population. As with the inmates that we work with, chaplains contact us all the time, wanting us to be able to send information in about our program so that brothers and sisters can utilize it. It's just really more or less a matter of Muslims actually understanding and making a more concerted effort to go and pursue these particular types of careers and helping brothers and sisters that are incarcerated. Some may think that there may not be enough money in it. It could be a number of other reasons on an individual level, but as a whole, it's really more or less as a community, we need to be more focused on actually providing these types of services and having people who are trained and capable of going in and providing these types of services. And one thing I often proffer is that not necessarily should the chaplain need to have a master's degree, because you have a lot of very qualified people who can go in and provide these services. And they don't have masters. We look at a lot of imams and other individuals across the country who've been providing services and working with individuals in the community or in other settings, and they've been doing a tremendous job, and they don't have master's degrees.
Why there are so many Muslims in the prison system, Brother Abdul Muhaimin?
Well, the primary thing is conversion. A lot of the brothers and sisters who are in prison right now who are Muslim, they converted while in prison. I converted when I was on my way to prison, going to federal prison 17 years ago next month. So it's really a matter of conversion. A lot less of the number comes from people who were actually born Muslim or raised as Muslims on the street and got into some kind of trouble and went to prison. That's a much lower numbers, probably maybe 1 or 2% of that 11,000.
Alhamdulillah, because this is my observation. I mean, wherever Muslims move in and mosque is established, crime goes down. I mean, in Philadelphia, in the inner city, when Imam Gamble's area, I mean, it's amazingly clean area. I'm in South Side. Wherever a mosque is, the property value goes up, crime goes down. And that's why I was wondering. So you're saying that these are the people who accepted Islam while they are in the system. Now, when they come out of the system, I mean, you are among those people who came off the system and became Muslim. Are there enough facilities available for them to be rehabilitated in the society?
Currently, there aren't. There are a lot of programs that are out there that brothers and sisters take advantage of when they come home, but either they have a totally secular base, or either they're based on a lot of Christian models. So there are not a lot of programs for Muslims that are run by Muslims to be able to come out and engage with reentry skills and training and coaching that helps them follow along the path of the teachings of Al-Islam. Tabor Foundation is one. There are 1 or 2 other programs that are coming up that may have a blend. Tabor Foundation is a little bit more focused on the Islamic studies, and then we transition the students. Islamic studies program is open to everyone, but primarily we have Muslims. Then we have the life skills open to everyone, but primarily our students are in there that are already Muslim. And then we also have the reentry services that we provide. And the same thing again, it's open to everyone, but primarily our students are in there and they're Muslim. So the opportunity to build out with some more programs is definitely needed across the country, because everywhere that you go, most major cities and even smaller ones and mid-sized ones, Muslims are coming home to these areas, and they need to have some type of service from the community that's available to help them and make them feel welcome.
Abdul Muhaimin, on your interview with NPR, I saw you have very precise number of 11,000. This are Muslim prisoners and only 13, chaplains available to serve them. How did you get these statistics?
Those numbers, as I'm aware of, they came from the study that was done by the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons for their particular inmate population. I think the Bureau of Prisons has around 130, 140 some odd thousand inmates that are incarcerated under their system. And of that number, they said 11,000 some change were Muslim. From experience, that number could be a lot higher. Oftentimes we see these numbers, they're very conservative estimates that are being made, because oftentimes you'll have brothers and sisters who convert, but they don't, when they come in, they may have been Christian or atheist or whatever, but after their conversion, they don't usually go back and give the new religious designation. And then you'll have people who go to religious services or who are not signed up to go to religious services. And then oftentimes the numbers can be a little bit less than what they actually are. But those numbers in particular, they should have come from the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons. Those weren't Taiba Foundation numbers.
Now, I visited Taiba Foundation website where you work. It says that help thousands of Muslims that are unjustly incarcerated. I paid attention to why they are unjustly incarcerated. So, do you encounter people who you feel are unjustly incarcerated, or it is just a fundraising thing which you have put it up?
No, we have several students who have cases that have been recognized as being unjust incarcerations. We have one brother named Ahmed Adisa. He's in Missouri. He was convicted of murder. The person who testified against him later was arrested for some other crime, and he retracted his statement and let them know that he had lied. There was a documentary done on Ahmed in his case, and is a process of trying to get him back into court to have this situation addressed and corrected. There's also another brother we have by the name of Kevin Tolliver in Ohio, and he has a case of murder that was looked at to be wrongly adjudicated, and he's been having issues with getting back in to have his case looked at again and redressed. There's a number of people across the country, we see this stuff all the time. Again, like with myself, I was guilty. You know, I wasn't guilty of exactly what they accused me of doing, but I was guilty. I used to break the law. And that was just the reality of it. A lot of people who are in prison are there because they did something wrong. And it's not a matter of trying to make things seem as if they were unfair. It's just we corrected ourselves after we got into the situation that we were in. We became Muslim, alhamdulillah, and we worked on correcting our past wrongs and living a life that was exemplary of what Islam stands for and what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught and expected of us. So it works both ways.
Okay. Brother Abdul Muhaymin, one of the names which I saw on your Taiba Foundation's website is Yusuf, that he was denied parole until your organization helped him hire a lawyer for the process, after which he was swiftly released. He now runs a not-for-profit which employs 70 people. So that seems to be an amazing success story there. What was his problem? Why he needed your help to get out?
Brother Yusuf Wali, as his name is, Andre Yusuf Wali, he's from California. He was a gang member. He was convicted of a murder. And after having spent, I believe it was 23 years at the time he was released, he had just been getting a lot of parole set-offs. He started programs. The program that he's actually running now, the original model of that was something that he started while he was in prison, and he had made tremendous efforts in working with the administration and with the population of the prison to have programs, peer-based programming that was working, and it was helping people. And it was just the fact that the parole board just didn't want to give him his opportunity to go home. And again, like you said, Taiba Foundation helped him retain a lawyer. The lawyer was able to get him another parole hearing, and he was subsequently released as a result of that. And here we are. I believe he was released in 2012. 9 years later, he's running $1 million organization employing people in the Los Angeles County. He also has an office in the Bay Area, but he's been doing tremendous work with the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you so much, Brother Abdul Muhaymin, for your time. Truly appreciate that.
I'm glad you had us here. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube and Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.